polluted water is used to grow food. Even in the driest areas, there is a limited supply of water underground. The people living here can often tell where to dig their wells by noting where certain trees are growing. But digging by hand limits the depths they can reach. The amount extracted from these traditional wells is controlled by man's physical capacity to lift out the water. This ensures a sustainable balance between the number of people and livestock relying on the wells and the amount of water available. The limits imposed by the availability of water keep the number of livestock at a level which the surrounding vegetation will be able to sustain in the long term. It may appear that installing pumps makes life easier for the nomads by enabling unlimited amounts of water to be drawn from underground lakes called aquifers. But there's a catch to this. More people move in with their livestock and settle permanently near the pumps. The underground water cannot be seen, and people believe it will never run out. But in low rainfall areas, the aquifers are not replenished and do dry up, leaving everybody without any water at all. The inescapable truth is that Kenya is drying out, largely due to the actions of human beings. As water shortages become more acute, the financial and social stresses on the country as a whole are escalating. If disaster is to be avoided, drastic measures urgently need to be adopted at all levels of society and enforced through good governance and careful management of our remaining natural resources. In order to understand why the country is drying out like this, we need to examine where our water comes from and what is happening to it. Kenya relies on 5 mountain ranges for most of its water supply. The highest of these water towers is Mount Kenya, whose ancient forests act as a sponge, storing huge amounts of water in various forms. This water is steadily released to the countryside below in the form of vapor, rain, rivers and underground flows. Frozen water in the form of snow and ice can be seen on Mount Kenya all year round. Invisible water vapor is carried on the wind. When it hits high ground, it rises and cools. This causes the water vapor to condense into droplets, which form mist. When these droplets reach a certain size and density, they fall either as rain or as snow. Water trapped by the lobelia remains liquid because the plant contains a substance which prevents it from freezing, even at sub-zero temperatures. This is an example of how plants and animals have adapted to live at these high, cold altitudes. The moorlands lie between the peaks and the forest and form important water catchment areas. This is a good example of a high catchment area where the shape of the land naturally allows water to run down off the slopes through the moorlands. Seepage from the saturated soil and vegetation forms millions of droplets which combine as runoff in a steady release, gaining in momentum as they move downhill. You can tell when rain has fallen higher up by the volume of runoff. This tiny flow is but one of millions making its way down the mountainside. Frogs have laid their eggs on wet rock faces. 2 days later, the frog's eggs have developed into tadpoles, encased in a jelly. When the tadpoles are old enough to survive on their own, they are still reliant on the presence of water to keep them moist, as is the algae on which they feed. Pools forming on the moorlands provide a habitat for larger animals, like these yellow-billed ducks. Runoff from higher up forms the headwaters of the Chania River on the Aberdare Mountains. The water tumbling over these falls will join other rivers flowing from the forests of the Aberdares and will eventually join a network of rivers coming off Mount Kenya. It would be to the greatest detriment of every Kenyan to assume that rivers will never dry up, no matter what people do to the environment. These mountain rivers will become major waterways that flow through the dry country en route to the Indian Ocean. Kenyans nationwide rely on rivers for drinking water, sanitation, power generation, agriculture and industry. We should never underestimate their value. If the rain god really lives on Mount Kenya, what does he think as he looks down from the peaks? Montane forests are crucial in the regulation of rainfall throughout the country. Bacteria are released from the forest, which attach themselves to invisible moisture droplets carried in the air. When these droplets become heavier than air, they fall as rain. Some of the rain falling on the forest will be stored in the soil, which acts as a moisture reservoir and sustains the rich plant life, which releases oxygen into the atmosphere, allowing animals and humans to breathe. Forests can be called the lungs of the earth. Plants absorb moisture from the soil through their roots. This is then slowly released as vapor from their leaves back into the air through a process called transpiration. Some of the rainwater falling on the vegetation evaporates into the air straight away. All this moisture can then be carried away by the wind to fall as rain further away. You may not think that these individual drops of water could be important, but imagine how many droplets are forming all around the forest at the same time. These mountain forests have developed over thousands of years,